The morning sun cast long shadows across the grounds of Buckingham Palace as crowds began to gather. The air buzzed with excitement. Tourists from every corner of the world huddled together, cameras ready, waiting for the famous changing of the guard ceremony. Some had been standing for hours determined to get the perfect spot. Children sat on parents' shoulders pointing at the palace's grand facade while tour guides shared stories about royal traditions that stretched back centuries. Among the sea of eager faces stood a young man named Alex Turner. At 24, he wasn't your typical tourist. With his carefully styled hair and expensive sneakers, he stood slightly apart from the crowd, checking his reflection in his phone screen more than the historic surroundings. Alex had flown all the way from Portland with a very specific goal, one that had nothing to do with appreciating British heritage. "Is it recording?" Alex whispered to his friend, who nodded, giving a thumbs up from behind a smartphone. The red record button was blinking steadily. "Trust me, this is going to blow up," Alex said with absolute confidence. Nobody's done anything this wild with the guards before. But this wasn't Alex's first attempt at viral fame. Back home, his social media accounts had grown steadily over the past year, 30,000 followers and climbing, all thanks to his increasingly shocking prank videos. What had started with harmless jokes had gradually evolved into more disruptive stunts. Each video needed to be more outrageous than the last to keep his viewers entertained and the sponsorship deals flowing. His friend looked nervous. "Are you sure about this? These guards are actual soldiers, you know?" Alex rolled his eyes. "That's the whole point. They can't react, that's their job. They just have to stand there and take it. It's perfect." In his hand, Alex clutched a large paper cup of coffee he'd purchased from a nearby shop. It was still steaming hot, exactly as he wanted it. Not hot enough to cause serious harm, he'd told himself, but enough to get a reaction from anyone who wasn't trained to stand perfectly still. As the crowds grew thicker, Alex spotted his target. Standing perfectly straight near the palace gates was a royal guard in the iconic red uniform and tall bearskin hat. The guard, Sergeant James Blackwood, though Alex neither knew nor cared about his name, stood completely motionless, eyes fixed forward. What Alex didn't know was that Sergeant Blackwood was no ordinary soldier. At 32, he had served his country for over a decade, including 2 difficult tours in Afghanistan. The ceremonial uniform he wore with such pride had been meticulously prepared that morning. Each brass button polished to a mirror shine, each crease perfect, a tradition he had learned from his grandfather, who had worn the same uniform during World War II. Alex began pushing his way through the crowd, ignoring the annoyed glances from families whose views he blocked. His friend followed, still filming, whispering a half-hearted sorry to those they disturbed. "Watch this," Alex whispered to the camera with a wink. "This is how you get 1 million views overnight." The distance between Alex and the guard narrowed. 20 feet, 10 feet, 5. A few people nearby began to notice something was off about his approach, his walk too purposeful, his expression too mischievous. A middle-aged woman frowned, sensing trouble, but before she could say anything, Alex had reached the guard. For one brief moment, Alex stood directly in front of Sergeant Blackwood, whose eyes remained fixed at a point in the distance, trained through years of discipline not to react to distractions. The sergeant could see Alex in his peripheral vision, but gave no indication of awareness. This was part of the job, the ceremonial stoicism that tourists found so fascinating. Alex turned to make sure the camera had a clear shot. He wanted his followers to see everything that was about to happen. His heart raced with the familiar rush that came before each prank, that perfect moment of anticipation before chaos. "Hey man, you look thirsty," Alex said loudly, making sure nearby tourists could hear. Several people turned to look. Phones came up, sensing something unusual was happening. Additional cameras that would catch the moment from different angles. Then, with theatrical slowness, Alex removed the lid from his coffee cup. The steam rose in the cool morning air. Few gasps came from those close enough to realize what he was planning. A father grabbed his daughter's hand and stepped back. An elderly couple looked on in horror. "This one's for my followers," Alex announced, and with a flick of his wrist he splashed the coffee directly onto the guard's immaculate red tunic. The hot liquid spread across the bright fabric, droplets splashing onto the polished buttons and ceremonial belt. Dark stains immediately formed on the uniform that had been pristine moments before. The coffee dripped slowly down the front of the shocked guard's chest. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. Someone shouted, "Stop him!" Too late. For several seconds after the coffee hit his uniform, Sergeant Blackwood didn't move at all. His face remained expressionless, his body rigid. This was what Alex had counted on, the famous discipline that prevented the guards from reacting to provocations. The very reason these soldiers were such popular targets for troublemakers. Alex grinned at the camera, already imagining the view count climbing as the video spread across the internet, already thinking about the perfect thumbnail image and clickbait title he would use. His most outrageous prank yet. But then something unexpected happened. Something that would change both men's lives forever. After exactly 3 seconds of absolute stillness, as coffee continued to drip down his once pristine uniform, Sergeant Blackwood did something that no Royal Guard was supposed to do. He moved. The crowd fell completely silent as Sergeant Blackwood slowly, deliberately, turned his head to look directly at Alex. The movement was so unexpected that several tourists gasped. Royal Guards simply didn't do this. They were famous worldwide for their unwavering stillness, for enduring all manner of distractions without the slightest acknowledgement. Children waved in their faces. Tourists posed beside them for selfies. Some visitors even shouted or made faces trying to provoke a reaction. Through it all, the guards remained motionless as if carved from stone. But the coffee dripping down Sergeant Blackwood's chest had changed everything. Alex's triumphant smile began to fade as he realized something unprecedented was happening. This wasn't part of his plan. The guard was supposed to stand there dripping with coffee while Alex walked away with video gold. Instead, the atmosphere around them had shifted. The excited murmurs of the crowd died away as everyone sensed they were witnessing something extraordinary. "He moved," someone whispered. Phones were raised higher. The circle of onlookers grew wider. Sergeant Blackwood's face remained remarkably composed. There was no anger in his expression, no hint of the humiliation he must have felt with hot coffee, soaking through his uniform. His eyes, clear blue and startlingly direct, locked onto Alex's with an intensity that made the young prankster take an involuntary step backward. Alex's friend, still filming, whispered, "Dude, I think we should go now." But it was too late to escape. 2 other guards had already begun moving toward them, their ceremonial pace replaced by purposeful strides. Nearby, a palace security officer spoke urgently into his radio. Within seconds, they would be surrounded. But what happened next shocked everyone, including Alex. Instead of signaling for Alex's arrest, Sergeant Blackwood raised his white-gloved hand slightly, halting the approaching guards. The small gesture carried unmistakable authority. The other guards stopped immediately, though they remained watchful, ready to intervene. Then Sergeant Blackwood spoke. In his 8 years of guard duty, through rain and snow, through summer heat, waves when tourists fainted nearby, through countless provocations far less severe than coffee throwing, he had never once broken his silence. Young recruits were told stories of his legendary discipline. Even during a parade when a wasp had stung his neck, Blackwood hadn't flinched. But now his voice, deep and clear with a slight northern accent, carried across the courtyard. The crowd grew even quieter, straining to hear. "Young man," he said, each word measured and distinct. "This uniform represents 350 years of service to crown and country." The coffee continued to drip, forming a small puddle at his feet. Blackwood didn't brush it away or acknowledge the discomfort. Each button was polished this morning with the same honor my grandfather showed when he wore this uniform at Normandy. His voice remained calm, but something in it, perhaps the mention of his grandfather, made several onlookers look down in embarrassment, as if they themselves had thrown the coffee. Alex's face had drained of color. The phone in his friend's hand trembled slightly, still recording. "I choose now to break protocol not out of anger," Sergeant Blackwood continued, "but because I believe you're capable of better than this." The words hung in the air. Simple words, No shouting, no threats. Just a quiet belief in someone who had shown him nothing but disrespect. An older woman in the crowd wiped away a tear. A father pulled his young son closer, whispering something in his ear. A teenage girl who had been snapping photos lowered her phone slowly, her expression thoughtful. Alex stood frozen, his mouth slightly open but no words coming out. For perhaps the first time since he'd started his prank career, he was completely lost for words. This wasn't how these videos were supposed to end. People were meant to get angry, to overreact, to chase him away while he laughed. They weren't supposed to speak to him with dignity after he'd humiliated them. Then, just as unexpectedly as he had moved, Sergeant Blackwood returned to his original position, eyes forward, back straight, face expressionless, as if the entire incident had never happened. The sudden return to protocol seemed to break the spell. Sound rushed back into the courtyard, murmurs, exclamations, the click of camera shutters. Several people began to applaud, slowly at first, then with growing enthusiasm. Someone shouted, "Well said," from the back of the crowd. Alex's friend lowered the phone but didn't stop recording. His hands were shaking. "Alex," he whispered urgently, "we need to go, right now." But Alex couldn't move. Something in the guard's words had cut through his carefully constructed persona. For a moment, just a moment, he wasn't thinking about views or followers or viral fame. He was thinking about his own grandfather, who had served in the military and who would be ashamed beyond words if he ever saw this video. Palace security finally reached them, 2 uniformed officers flanking Alex and his friend. "You'll need to come with us, sir," one said firmly but without roughness. As they were led away, Alex looked back over his shoulder. Sergeant Blackwood remained perfectly still, coffee stains darkening his red tunic, his discipline once again impeccable. The crowd parted to let them pass, faces showing not the amusement Alex had hoped to provoke, but something much worse: disappointment, judgment, and in some cases, anger on behalf of the guard who had responded with such unexpected grace. What Alex didn't know, couldn't know, was that his friend's trembling hand had captured every moment perfectly. The coffee throw, the guard's movement, the powerful words, everything. And back at their hotel room, when his friend quietly uploaded the video without Alex's knowledge, he gave it a simple title. He threw coffee at a royal guard for fun. What the guard did next shocked the world. By sunset, the video had been viewed over 3 million times. By midnight, it passed 10 million. People around the world were sharing it with comments like, "This is what real dignity looks like," and "Watch until the end. I got chills." News websites began picking up the story, embedding the video in articles with headlines announcing the most powerful response to a prank ever filmed. Alex hadn't slept. He sat in his hotel room, staring at his phone in disbelief as the numbers kept climbing. This was the viral hit he'd always wanted, but not for the reasons he'd expected. He wasn't being celebrated, he was being condemned. Royal Guard wisdom was trending worldwide. Television morning shows were playing the clip on repeat. Radio hosts were discussing it. Even celebrities were sharing it with thoughtful comments about respect and dignity. "Turn it off," Alex said weakly to his friend, who was scrolling through the thousands of comments pouring in. "I can't look anymore." His friend hesitated. "There's something you should know. The palace released a statement about the guard." Alex groaned and buried his face in his hands. "Are they pressing charges? Am I going to jail in a foreign country?" "No, it's not that." His friend turned the phone so Alex could see. They identified him. His name is Sergeant James Blackwood. He's a decorated soldier, 2 tours in Afghanistan, multiple commendations. His grandfather was at Normandy, just like he said. The hotel room phone rang, making them both jump. Alex stared at it like it might bite him. "That's the 3rd call. From the lobby," his friend said. "There are reporters downstairs asking for you." Meanwhile, across London at Buckingham Palace, senior military officials were holding an emergency meeting. On the surface, the issue was simple. Sergeant Blackwood had violated protocol. The Queen's Guard were never, under any circumstances, supposed to move or speak while on duty, unless directly threatened. It was a tradition dating back centuries, but the public reaction complicated things enormously. He should be disciplined, argued one colonel, slapping his hand on the conference table. Rules exist for a reason. If one guard can break protocol, where does it end? A younger officer cleared her throat. With respect, sir, have you seen the public response? People are calling him a hero. There are petitions circulating with thousands of signatures already, demanding he receive commendation, not punishment. Since when do we make military decisions based on public opinion polls? The colonel shot back. The room fell silent as the door opened and a senior palace communications official entered with a tablet in hand. The video has now been viewed over 15 million times, she announced. It's the top story on every major news network. We've received calls from the Prime Minister's office and requests for statements from over 40 international news organizations. She placed the tablet on the table, displaying a world map with glowing points representing the video's spread. This is no longer just about one incident or one soldier. This is about the image of the Royal Guard and by extension the monarchy around the world. Back at the hotel, Alex finally answered the room phone. It was the hotel manager. Turner, I must ask you and your companion to check out immediately. We've received numerous complaints from other guests who recognized you from the video, and several reporters are now in our lobby, disrupting our business. But we're booked for 3 more nights, Alex protested weakly. Your remaining nights will be refunded, the manager replied coldly. A taxi is waiting at the service entrance to take you to another location. I suggest you use it to avoid the cameras at the main door. Alex's phone buzzed with a notification. His social media sponsors were canceling their contracts one by one. The sports drink company that paid him most generously had already released a public statement. We do not condone disrespect of military personnel or public servants. Effective immediately, we have terminated our relationship with Alex Turner. His follower count, which had been steadily growing for months, was now dropping by the thousands. People were unsubscribing in droves, leaving angry comments before they went. In the taxi, heading to a cheaper hotel on the outskirts of London, Alex checked his university email. There was a message from the Dean of Students. This behavior reflects poorly on our institution. The Ethics Committee will review your standing when you return. My life is over, Alex whispered, letting his phone drop into his lap. His friend looked out the window at the London streets passing by. You know what the worst part is? That guard was right about you. You are better than this, at least you used to be. The words stung because they were true. Before the pranks, before the desperate chase for views and followers, Alex had been different. He'd wanted to make films that mattered, documentaries that changed how people saw the world. Somewhere along the way, that dream had twisted into something ugly. Meanwhile, Sergeant Blackwood had been temporarily relieved of public guard duty. Not as punishment, though the official investigation was ongoing, but because his presence was drawing enormous crowds. Tourists were lining up by the hundreds hoping to catch a glimpse of the coffee guard, as tabloids had dubbed him. In the barracks, his fellow guards treated him with a mixture of awe and concern. Some worried about the precedent he'd set. Others secretly admired his courage. The captain wants to see you, a young guard told him, looking nervous on Blackwood's behalf. Blackwood nodded, straightened his uniform, a fresh one with no coffee, stains, and walked to the captain's office with the same measured dignity he brought to everything. The captain, a veteran of 30 years' service, didn't look up from his paperwork when Blackwood entered and saluted. At ease, Sergeant. He finally raised his eyes. Do you know what's on my desk right now? No, sir. Letters, hundreds of them, and emails, thousands, from veterans, from school children, from ordinary people around the world. He gestured to the overflowing inbox. All about you. Blackwood remained silent, hands clasped behind his back. The palace switchboard is jammed. The website crashed, all because of 9 words you spoke to a foolish young man with a coffee cup. The captain leaned back in his chair. 9 words that technically you had no right to speak while on duty. Yes, sir. I understand, sir. The captain studied him for a long moment. The disciplinary hearing is scheduled for tomorrow morning. There will be generals present. He paused. And one more thing. That young man, Alex Turner, has requested to speak with you privately, through official channels. Blackwood blinked, the only sign of his surprise. The question is, the captain continued, are you willing to meet with him? The meeting was arranged for Wednesday afternoon in a small plain office at the edge of the palace grounds. No press was allowed, no cameras, no phones. Just two men who had never expected to meet again, certainly not like this. Alex arrived, first, escorted by a stern-faced security officer who checked his ID twice before letting him sit in the waiting area. His hands wouldn't stop shaking. He'd changed clothes 3 times that morning, finally settling on a simple button-up shirt and dark pants, the most respectful outfit he owned. He hadn't slept properly in days, and dark circles shadowed his eyes. A clock on the wall ticked loudly in the silence. 5 minutes passed. 10. Alex wondered if the sergeant had changed his mind. He wouldn't blame him. Finally, the door opened. Sergeant Blackwood entered not in his ceremonial red uniform, but in the standard khaki service dress of a British Army sergeant. Without the tall bearskin hat, he looked younger than Alex had expected. His posture remained impeccably straight, his shoes polished to a mirror shine. "Mr. Turner," he said with a small nod. "Sergeant Blackwood." Alex rose quickly, almost knocking over his chair in the process. He stuck out his hand, then awkwardly pulled it back, unsure if the gesture would be welcomed. Blackwood gestured to the small table between 2 chairs. "Please sit." They sat across from each other, neither speaking for what felt like an eternity. The security officer had left them alone, though Alex suspected someone was watching through the small camera mounted in the corner of the room. Finally, Alex broke the silence. "I didn't think you'd agree to meet me." "I almost didn't," Blackwood replied honestly. "My commanding officers advised against it." "Then why did you?" The sergeant considered the question carefully. "The same reason I spoke to you that day, I suppose. I believe people deserve a chance to be better than their worst moments." Alex looked down at his hands. "I can barely look you in the eye," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't think about you as a person. You were just a prop for my video, something to use for likes and shares." Blackwood nodded slowly. "That's precisely what I wanted to address. Not the coffee. The uniform can be cleaned. But the idea that some human beings can be treated as objects for entertainment. I've gotten death threats," Alex said suddenly. "Thousands of hateful messages. People showed up at my parents' house. My college is investigating me. I might get expelled." If he expected sympathy, Blackwood's response surprised him. "Are you asking me to feel sorry for you, Mr. Turner?" No, I just..." Alex took a deep breath. "I'm trying to understand how things went so wrong so fast." "Things went wrong," Blackwood said quietly, "the moment you decided another person's dignity was less important than your social media numbers." The words hung in the air between them. Alex couldn't argue. It was the simple truth. "Tell me something," Blackwood continued. "Before all this, before the pranks and the followers, what did you want to do with your life?" The question caught Alex off guard. He'd expected anger, even a lecture, but not this interest in who he had been before. "I wanted to make documentaries," he answered, surprised by how emotional his voice sounded. "Real ones about things that matter. I was saving for film school when I started my channel. But then the prank videos took off and suddenly I was making real money and companies wanted to sponsor me and it was easier to throw coffee on strangers than to pursue something meaningful." Blackwood finished for him. "Yeah," Alex said, his shoulders slumping. "That's exactly what happened. For the next hour they talked, really talked, about respect, what it meant, why it mattered, about the friends Blackwood had lost during his service and the kind of courage that never made it into viral videos. About how Alex had slowly crossed lines he once would have considered unthinkable, all in the search for more views, more validation, from strangers on the internet. "My grandfather would be so ashamed of me," Alex said at one point, wiping his eyes quickly with the back of his hand. "You mentioned him before. He served?" Alex nodded. Marine Corps, Vietnam. He never talked about it much, but he taught me to stand up when a woman enters the room, to look people in the eye when speaking to them. Basic respect stuff. He swallowed hard. He died last year. Thank God he didn't live to see that video. Or, Blackwood suggested gently, thank God he doesn't have to see what you do next. Alex looked up, confused. What do you mean? I mean, your mistake has given you something unexpected. A platform. Millions of people now know your name and face. The question is, what you'll do with that attention. For the first time since the incident, Alex felt something other than despair. Not hope exactly, but possibility. Do you have any idea what they're going to do to you? He asked. The disciplinary hearing and all that? Blackwood's expression revealed nothing. That's not your concern. But it's my fault. I should be the one facing consequences, not you. You did nothing wrong. I broke protocol, Blackwood stated simply. There are rules for a reason. I knew what I was doing. But that's not fair, the sergeant smiled slightly. Life rarely is, Mr. Turner. As their time drew to a close, Blackwood stood and straightened his uniform. A habit so ingrained he probably didn't realize he was doing it. I have one question for you, Alex said, also standing. Why did you do it? Why break the rules, too? Speak to me, of all people. Blackwood considered his answer carefully. I've stood guard at that same spot for nearly 6 years. I've been mocked, taunted, even spat at once. Protocol says to ignore it all. He paused. But that morning, something in your eyes, just before you threw the coffee, made me think there was more to you than what you were doing. That perhaps you'd simply lost your way. And now? Alex asked quietly. What do you think now? I think, Sergeant Blackwood said, extending his hand for a proper handshake, that our worst actions don't have to define us, but our response to them might. Alex took the offered hand, gripping it firmly the way his grandfather had taught him. Before they parted, Blackwood made an unusual request. Whatever you decide to do next, whatever path you choose, make it worthy of the attention you've been given. As Alex was escorted back through the palace grounds, past the spot where he'd thrown the coffee just days before, he realized something important. The sergeant hadn't once said, I forgive you. Perhaps that wasn't his to give. Perhaps forgiveness was something Alex would have to earn through actions, not just words. And for the first time in days, he had an idea of where to start. 1 week after meeting with Sergeant Blackwood, Alex sat alone in his small apartment back home. His flight from London had been miserable, other passengers recognizing him, whispering, some openly glaring. He'd pulled his hood up and pretended to sleep most of the way. Outside his window, rain tapped against the glass, matching his mood. On the desk sat his camera equipment, expensive gear bought with sponsorship money that had now dried up. His phone remained silent. Even his closest friends had distanced themselves, not wanting to be associated with the backlash. Alex stared at his reflection in his computer screen. The last video on his channel had been posted over 2 weeks ago, a mindless prank involving an air horn in a library. It seemed childish now, embarrassing. Yet that video had 200,000 views. People had laughed, companies had paid him. He opened a new document and began typing, deleted it, started again. For hours, he wrote and rewrote, searching for the right words. Finally, as evening turned to night, he set up his camera, adjusted the lighting, and took a deep breath. No fancy intro today, he began, looking directly into the lens. No music, no special effects, just me, talking to you honestly for the first time. His hands were shaking, but his voice grew steadier as he continued. Most of you know what happened in London. You've seen the video. I threw coffee at a royal guard for views, and he responded with a dignity I didn't deserve. Alex swallowed hard. What you don't know is what happened after. I met with Sergeant Blackwood privately. We talked for hours. And that conversation changed everything for me. He spoke for 20 minutes straight, no cuts, no edits, about how he'd gradually crossed more and more lines in pursuit of fame, about how social media had warped his sense of right and wrong, About the meeting with Blackwood and the simple, powerful question he'd been asked. What would he do with the platform his mistake had given him? "I can't undo what I did," Alex said, his voice breaking slightly. "But I can try to be worthy of the second chance I was given. Starting today, I'm changing the direction of this channel completely." He announced he would be volunteering with veterans organizations and would donate all future social media earnings to military families in need. His first project would be a documentary series highlighting the stories of veterans, their service, their struggles, and their lives after returning home. "To Sergeant Blackwood and to everyone I've disrespected for the sake of views, I'm sorry. Words aren't enough, I know that, but actions might be, over time." He uploaded the video with a simple title, "Starting Over." Then he shut his laptop and went to bed, expecting nothing. By morning, something unexpected had happened. The view count was climbing rapidly. But more surprisingly, the comments section was filled with something he hadn't seen in a long time. Encouragement. People sharing stories of their own mistakes and second chances. Veterans offering to participate in his documentary project. Even a few former sponsors reaching out cautiously, interested in the new direction. Meanwhile, across the ocean in London, Sergeant Blackwood was facing his own new reality. The disciplinary hearing had been tense, but brief. In the end, the military leadership had made a pragmatic decision. Blackwood would receive a formal reprimand in his file for breaking protocol, but he would also be reassigned to a new role, speaking at officer training sessions about moral courage and the human element of military discipline. "Your actions violated the letter of our regulations," his commanding officer told him privately after the hearing. "But they honored their spirit in a way that resonated with millions. We'd be fools not to recognize that." The coffee incident, as it was now officially called in military circles, had been incorporated into ethics training not just for the guards, but for police academies and corporate leadership programs around the world. Blackwood's simple response, those 9 words, spoken to a foolish young man, had become a case study in responding to provocation with wisdom rather than reaction. For months, Blackwood received letters from around the world, from veterans who felt seen, from young people who had changed how they treated others after watching the video, from parents who had shown it to their children as a lesson in dignity. He answered as many as he could, his neat handwriting filling page after page with thoughtful responses. 6 months later, Alex traveled back to London. Not as a prankster this time, but as a documentary filmmaker with a small crew and proper filming permits. His series on veteran stories had found a modest but dedicated audience, and a streaming service had provided funding for an international episode focusing on British veterans, including, with his permission, Sergeant Blackwood. They met again, this time in a London cafe with cameras rolling. The awkwardness of their first meeting was gone, replaced by a cautious mutual respect. They weren't friends exactly, but there was a connection forged through their unusual shared experience. "If you could go back to that day," the interviewer asked Blackwood, "would you do anything differently? Would you still break protocol and speak?" Blackwood considered the question carefully, hands wrapped around his teacup. "Rules exist for good reasons," he said finally. "The discipline of the Queen's Guard isn't just for show. It represents something important about duty and service." He paused, glancing briefly at Alex. "But sometimes the best way to honor what those rules stand for is to recognize when a human moment calls for something more." Later that evening, after the cameras were packed away, Alex and Blackwood found themselves walking alone through a London park, the interview complete but both feeling there was more to say. "My grandfather would have liked you," Alex said suddenly. "He believed in second chances, too." Blackwood smiled slightly. "The older I get, the more I believe we're all just collections of second chances. It's what we do with them that matters." As they reached the park exit, Alex stopped. "You know, I never properly thanked you. Not just for agreeing to the interview, but for—" He gestured vaguely, searching for words. "For not punching you after you threw coffee on me?" Blackwood suggested with rare humor. Alex laughed. "Yeah, that too, but mostly for seeing something in me worth talking to when everyone else just saw someone to condemn. The hardest person to see clearly is often yourself." Blackwood replied. Sometimes it takes an unexpected moment to bring things into focus. They parted ways at the underground station, shaking hands firmly, each returning to very different lives than they'd had before their paths crossed. The incident that began with a thoughtless act had evolved into something neither man could have predicted, a global conversation about dignity, consequence, and the power of responding to provocation with wisdom rather than reaction. Alex's documentary series continued to grow, each episode focusing on different veterans and their stories, quietly building an audience that cared about substance over sensation. Sergeant Blackwood eventually rose to become an instructor at the Royal Military Academy, where his lessons on ethical leadership always included the reminder that sometimes the bravest action is restraint, and sometimes the strongest response is a kind one. And somewhere in the complicated algorithm of social media, the video of their encounter continued to resurface regularly, finding new audiences years later. Not as a prank gone wrong, but as a moment when humanity shone through the noise, a simple reminder that how we respond to those who wrong us can sometimes change more lives than we know.